So Dr. Jeffrey Dew is an associate professor in the School of Family Life at BYU. He received a dual-title PhD in Human Development and Family Studies and Mammography from the Pennsylvania State University. He started his career at Utah State University, where he taught statistics and research methods at the graduate level and family studies courses at the undergraduate level. He now teaches family theory and family finance courses at BYU. You know you took that from me, right?
What's that?
Did you know you took family finance from me?
I didn't know that, but I'm happy about it.
Warning, but it's really good for you.
Yeah.
Below there. Dr. Dew's research focuses on the daily life issue of the association between family resources, money and time, and relationship quality. Examples of Jeff's recent projects include examining factors that protect couples' marital quality during financial difficulties, and a qualitative strengths-based analysis of how African American couples talk about the role of finances in their marriage. He is also just starting a project that examines the longitudinal association between sound financial management behavior and couples' marital quality using the Flourishing Families data set at BYU. When not engaging with students or in research, Jeff enjoys reading and playing a wide variety of board and card games with his children. So we'll turn it over to Dr. Dew.
Okay. So I kind of sound like a frog today. I started getting sick yesterday afternoon. All my kids have been sick. And so I think it's because the Lord doesn't want me talking for 2 hours here today. So what I need is a lot of participation from you guys, okay? Yes? Okay, good. Now I know that graduate students are a little bit more disposed to participation than undergraduate students, so that's nicer. So, all right. All right, so we're going to start off with a disclaimer. My father, for much of his career, was a lawyer, so I'm a lawyer's son. We're going to start a disclaimer. I am a basic researcher who cares about families' day-to-day life. So I'm not a therapist by any stretch of the imagination. That being said, I was a psych undergrad here at BYU. I got my minor in this department. I did do 2 years worth of work in the mental health field, and that kind of showed me that I was not dispositionally cut out to be a therapist, and I admire people who can. I realized I couldn't leave my clients' problems in the office. I took them home with me, and that wasn't a good thing. So I realized I'm not supposed to be a therapist. I've got to go back to grad school, and so I did, and so that's what I do. One other, disclaimer: I'm not a financial professional, so I'm not here offering any financial advice today in any way, shape, or form. And I'm also not a licensed therapist, so I'm not offering relationship advice. It's kind of embarrassing when I go to family gatherings and people ask me, Jeff, what are you studying? And I say money and marriage, and then they say, oh, what do you find? And I'll say something like, savings is good for marriage, debt is bad for marriage. And sometimes they'll look at their spouse, right, and these are my relatives, okay? They'll look at their spouse and they'll say, see, I told you we shouldn't have gone into debt for, whatever, the cabinets or the dirt bikes. I've heard both of those. It's embarrassing. So anyway, I'm not here to talk about any of y'all's personal relationships, although I may share some stories of my own. So an alternative, because I'm a basic researcher, I'm not a therapist. An alternative title of my presentation is How Not to Offer Research Implications for People Who Know More Than You Do, right? I feel distinctly uncomfortable when I'm reading or when I'm writing manuscripts for some journals, and they want me to include implications for practitioners. I feel uniquely unqualified to do that. I don't know why they make us do that. And especially when I review a fair amount of other people's manuscripts as well, and they're telling all the practitioners what they should do with this research. I hate that word should, at least in that particular context, right? In the gospel context, should is just fine a word. But when researchers are telling practitioners what they should be doing, it makes me distinctly uncomfortable. Especially because a lot of the suggestions that I read from other people strike me as exceptionally naive, right? Practitioners are probably already doing what you're saying, right, what you're telling them to do. And not only that, practitioners know how to take the research better and use it their own ways. So anyway, okay. So that's my here's why I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable talking to you guys, but I think it's really important, so that's why I'm here too, okay? So let's start off with a quote by Dr. Scott Stanley. Dr. Stanley is one of the nation's foremost marriage researchers. I think, Dr. Gottman gets a little more press, but Dr. Stanley's up there too. And this is his quote: "While process may be king, that does not mean that content does not matter." Okay, while process may be king, content does not matter. Do we need to define process and content here? Are we fine understanding the distinctions? Okay. Sometimes people say, "Well, Jeff, what do you mean when you say processing and content?" As I'm writing it out, it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to explain this. But you guys know what process versus content is, right? So my talk today, or my speech, or whatever this is, workshop, seminar, has kind of three questions that have kind of guided my research as I've done my research, and I've put it into the language of therapy, right? This notion of might content differentially influence process, right? Might there be some content that actually influences process in a way that's different than other content? I think that money is. Three questions. Is money a qualitative, this should say A, or is money qualitatively different than other content? Okay. Then why, and then how do we address it, right? How can we best use it therapeutically, right? This notion. Now, what you'll find as I go on in my talk today is that my expertise dwindles the farther down this list you go. Okay, so I know a lot about this. I know some about this, and I almost know nothing about this. So I'm going to have to rely on y'all's help, especially as we get to here. And we don't have a writing board, which is really sad. I was hoping we could write on the board. Okay. Okay, I may have to raise it and lower it, but that's okay. All right, so one of the questions that I always, whenever I'm talking to my graduate students and they come up to me, and Jeff, I've got this great idea for a master's thesis. This is one of the questions that I always ask them. Or my doctoral dissertation, I say, who cares? Why is this important, right? I force them. I'm not that mean, right? I'm a little more diplomatic than that. But let's get the who cares question out of the way first. So money, we use it frequently, right? Is there anybody who has not engaged in a financial transaction in the past week? How about in the past 3 days, by raise of hand? Everyone's used money within the past 3 days. How about today and yesterday? Is there anyone who has not used money yesterday and today? Okay, we've got 2, maybe 3. Okay, so we really, it's something that we engage in frequently. It is a common everyday behavior. You've got to have money to live, right? It's a necessary part of life. So that's one of the who cares, is we're engaging in using money, thinking about money, feeling about money, right? We can't deny the emotional issues when we think about money on a near daily basis, okay? So that's part of why who cares. If we think about money, it also intersects with a whole lot of other areas that we care about, right? Class and socioeconomic status, culture, race, gender. Lots of studies have shown that financial behaviors, financial thoughts about money, and all these things vary according to class, SES, culture, race, and gender. Okay? It's a notion that can be uncomfortable, right? Can be distinctly uncomfortable to talk about maybe how financial behaviors vary by class, or to talk about the ways that gender and money interact. Okay, but they do, and it is there. If you look at, and somebody did an analysis of how often people have looked at financial issues in relationships, we just don't see a whole lot, right? We look across the disciplines in the social sciences, and we don't get a whole lot of studies in there as far as finances and relationships goes. In fact, I'm actually doing right now a review with some of my graduate students to see, actually with this, specifically looking at this diversity issues, how diversity issues are related to the studies that actually have gotten done. And then we also don't see money in MFT curricula or premarital counseling, right? Now we can, and I'm not making any indictment here of the MFT, but I have never found a program, an MFT program, that actually requires a course in finances. So I don't think there's a single program out there in the United States of MFT programs that have a required class in finances, which is interesting because there are other content courses that are required, like human sexuality. Human sexuality is typically required as part of your MFT program. Addiction, also, right? Which is good and right, because those are problems that MFT people will be facing in the field. But money too is a big problem, as I'm going to make an argument in a minute. Premarital counseling, also not a whole lot out there as far as money. I had a good friend in graduate school. He was getting married. He had to go through premarital counseling as part of to be able to get married in his church. And I asked him, I said, hey, did you guys talk about money? Oh, this was like a 6-week, 8-week course. It was a pretty extensive course. Oh, for maybe 10 minutes. I said, oh, what'd they teach you? Oh, they told us guys not to dominate our wives by using our money, and they told the women not to spend too much. I said, oh, that's it? That's it. Okay, 10 minutes of that. That's all they got, money and marriage. Okay, but didn't teach them how to do a budget or anything like that, but all right. So let's talk about this notion that money might be qualitatively different out there. Studies have suggested that money is one of the most frequent topic of conflicts for couples. Okay, one of Scott Stanley's studies using a national data, for example, found that couples thought about money more than anything else. What was interesting was when he broke it up by people who were in their first marriages versus people who were in marriages where at least one of the couples had been divorced previously. He found differences. Money for the first marriage, for those who were in their first marriages, money was indeed the number one thing that they thought about. But for those couples who were in their second marriages, they thought more about their kids actually than money. So, all right. So that's kind of interesting. That and that hasn't been shown in every single study, but frequently comes up. Money is one of the most frequent areas of fighting for couples. Oh, I should mention that most of this evidence that I'm giving you is non-clinical. Okay, most of this is population-based studies. This is really cool, sort of, right? The finding itself is intellectually interesting and neat. Not necessarily the phenomenon is cool, right? But the finding is interesting. Anyway. So there have been a few studies that have shown that couples who fight about money actually report worse conflict process while they fight about money than other types. I'm going to cite 3, and they're on at least 2 or 3 of these are on your sheet. So the PAP et al. Paper, really interesting study. They had people record over a few week period what they thought about. Okay, so they gave them diaries to record their marital conflict. And what they found was that not only were they supposed to talk about the topic, but they were supposed to record how long the fight lasted, whether it was resolved, what types of, process they used as they engaged in this conflict. And they found that, I'm just going to read this straight out so I can report it correctly. Financial disputes lasted longer in terms of the actual minutes. They were less likely to be resolved. In other words, they were fighting over it more frequently. And spouses rated the fights about money as more crucial to their relationship than other topics that they fought about. They also found that husbands and wives both reported that husbands exhibited more depressive behavior during fights about money and then fights about other things. And that wives reported more depressive behavior as well. Okay, so interesting. I did a study with an MFT student who we looked at longitudinal data, and we looked at changes in topics of conflict and the resulting changes in their conflict style. And what we found was that changes in, when couples increased their conflict over money, we found an increase in using heated arguments rather than other types of conflict styles. We also kind of made this Gottman-esque variable where we kind of took a ratio of heated conflicts to calm discussion. And we found that increases in fighting about money led to increases in this, using more heated argument rather than using calm discussion. Kind of interesting. So what we found was that we were testing changes in other topics as well. And the only thing that came close to the changes in the money findings that we found were the changes in changes in fighting about chores. For some reason, changes in fighting about chores were also linked to some of those same things that changes in fighting about money was, but the fighting about money changes were stronger than the fighting about chores. All right. And then number 3. Some of the things that I hear when I'm out and about in the community, people ask me, oh, what do you study, Dr. Jones? I say money and marriage. And I say, oh, good, because money is the number one cause of divorce. Number one cause. And I've heard that over and over and over, and then I started looking at the research, and there was almost nothing in the literature about this. So we had this really interesting lay idea that a lot of people believed, but it hadn't been really tested, and not very tested. The stuff that had tested it didn't test it very well. Hadn't really looked at it. And so is money the number one predictor of divorce? Well, it depends on how you define number one predictor. Okay. So Paul Amato, who's another great marital researcher, had two time point, well, lots of actually time points of data, and they looked at different, they tracked couples over time to see whether they divorce, and what they find, and I'm going to raise this up for a minute because I need to be able to draw. What they found was that for both husbands and wives, the number one predictor of divorce was not money, was affairs. Right? And that's probably not very surprising, right? Now, frankly, I don't think affairs actually cause divorce. I think affairs are symptomatic of a marriage that has broken down, that is headed to divorce, but, whatever. Number 2, for wives, the number 2 predictor for wives was when they felt that their husbands spent money foolishly. Okay? Number 3, following really close behind the money issue for wives, was if their husband abused drugs or alcohol. So money for wives was right up there with drug and alcohol abuse. Crazy, okay? For the husbands, it wasn't like that. For the husbands, number one was affairs, number two was drug and alcohol abuse on the part of their wives. And then money ranked number 6 down on the list as in terms of cause of divorce when they felt their wives spent money foolishly. But it was still statistically significant. And it was significant where other things that we care very deeply about weren't, didn't predict divorce. Like wives getting angry easily did not predict divorce. Money did. All right. And then I did a study too a while back. We had 2 time points. We measured couples, what couples fought about. We had sex and money and chores and in-laws and the time they spent together, okay? And then we had whether or not they divorced over time by this second wave. For husbands, the only time one conflict topic that predicted divorce in the future was fights about money. For wives, there were 2. First one was fights about money. Second one was fights about sex. Okay, but the fights about money, again, was a stronger predictor. So is money the number one predictor of divorce? Here's where I need to draw. The answer is it depends. If you have a pool of 100 couples where affairs are present in their marriage, okay, 100 couples, they're having problems with affairs, and then you have 100 couples fighting about money. Follow them for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, you'll have a lot more of these couples divorced than these couples, right? I would argue the same is probably true if you substituted alcoholism or drug addiction here. I'll bet you'd have more of these people divorced than these. But if you look at common problems, right? If you look at issues that lots of couples face, because alcoholism and drug abuse is not necessarily the most common marital problem, right? Neither are affairs. One of our estimates about between 15 and 20% of people have affairs. I would argue that yes, if we're looking at common marital problems, money is a pretty darn good predictor of divorce. Okay, so that's my evidence that there might be something about money that is qualitatively different than other content areas, right? Content areas. So let's talk a little bit about the clinical evidence. There's not a whole lot out there, okay, as far as the clinical evidence. There's not a whole lot out there as far as the non-clinical evidence, but as far as clinical evidence, there's even less. One study showed that 1/3 of couples in marital therapy reported, they looked at, this study was interesting. They looked at couples who were in marital therapy or couples therapy. They also looked at couples who were in financial counseling, right, a different type of counseling, and then they looked at the general population. And they found that 1/3 of the couples in marital therapy reported financial problems, and 1/3 of couples in financial counseling reported marital problems. And this was much higher than their general population sample that they had. So it's kind of interesting that there is a type of comorbidity, if you will, of these two problems among a clinical sample. Now, I don't, that's about all I got, okay? So I want to know for you guys, have y'all started your therapy? What do you call it? Your hours? I know you call it your hours, but yeah. So what have you seen as far as this is where the interaction comes in? Yes, please.
I've been practicing for a few years, but
Yay.
The main thing it made sense to me when you said that it was 6 for men and higher for women, because I think when I talk to women about it, it's a security issue. They want to know if they're going to be okay, and if he can't provide, then they don't feel secure in their marriage. So that's what I tend to see.
Yeah, or even if he is providing, if he's buying, the big truck with the chrome package, right? That can be problematic, or that can impinge on their security issue, right? What else? have you guys seen clinically as far as financial issues and family stuff? I'm glad to have y'all here who are practitioners too. Yes, please.
I've been in that profession for 14 years.
Oh, great.
I actually work with children, so I very rarely work with marital. I have like every once in a while that'll happen, but I find that they come to me because they're fighting, right? And they're communicating poorly and all those type of things. But I really haven't, in my small sample, they don't tell me that they're fighting about finances, which I think is interesting because I'm most likely that's one of the fights, right? But they tell me other fights that they're having or the fight they had that day. But I don't get a lot of people saying, yeah, we're fighting about money, which is interesting to me.
That is interesting.
I know. They just don't want to tell me that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I mean, people talk about the taboo about talking about money in relationships. I'm not sure whether that taboo still exists today. I mean, certainly in the past. Does anybody need, okay, more? This is just research that, or studies that relate to what we're talking about today. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about today draws from this.
No, I have a copy.
Oh, you have a copy. Okay.
I think it's also interesting because therapy can be so expensive. I think sometimes if they are struggling with some of the topics, that we don't always see them because they can't afford to come.
Interesting.
That would make sense in my practice because I don't take insurance. They just pay me.
Yeah, so this could be maybe financial issues in and of themselves may be barriers to therapy, right? Or access issues or whatever the terminologies you guys use in this particular field. Yeah.
So with that in mind, I worked for years with LDS Family Services, where you get an interesting population of people who can't afford therapy, but bishops will pay. So it's not an impediment to therapy. But I still can't think of a couple who came in with a primary presenting problem of finances. Now, financial problems were there, and I could see the strain of the situation exacerbating already existing problems in my marriage. And that, I think, is more of what I'm seeing in my marriage practice.
And we'll talk about that in a minute too. Yeah.
Sorry. But as she said that, I was thinking of the few cases I have seen with finances as a presenting problem. And it actually was more of a betrayal issue. Like, oh, we had this inheritance and he spent it all without telling me. And it's more of a like deceit and lying thing, kind of like with affairs, than it is like.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder too, I mean, just kind of this discussion here makes me wonder if you know, because we have the population studies, and most of the studies that I've said are generally based on national population. I wonder if Mormons are weird too. Like, I don't do any of my financial research in Utah because I just don't even want to deal with that, right? I just, no, we're not going to deal with that. We're going to get our, you know, typically national population. So I do have a couple of Utah couples in my data sets because it's national representative, but yeah, okay. So appreciate that, appreciate your sharing. So question number one, summary. The question is money qualitatively different, okay? There is some evidence to say that it might be, okay? There's not overwhelming evidence. There's not huge bucket loads because, again, nobody's studying this anyway, except for, I don't know, probably a half dozen of us. But there is some evidence to suggest that money is different, particularly in the studies that show that that money as a content issue may influence process, right? That to me is fascinating. And so that, you know, that divorce study that I told you about, you know, people fighting about money or in-laws or sex or whatever, and money was the only one that predicted divorce for men and sex and money for wives. We tried to explain that, and one of the explanations was that financial fights did lead to worse process, right? Couples reporting worse conflict process, and that may be, and that worse conflict process was, of course, you know, as you guys would suspect, was related to higher likelihoods of divorce. So, all right, that's all. I mean, I would say question one has not been conclusively answered, but I think that there is some. Oops, I went backwards, huh? I think there is some evidence to suggest that is the case. please.
I think you may have mentioned this before, but what are your opinions on why financial issues are affecting process more than others?
It's like I paid this man. I don't even know your name. It's like I slipped in $5 to ask that question. Because that is, uh-oh, I didn't animate it correctly. Oh, no. All right, so that is the next question. Why? But I want to ask you guys. I'm going to throw the question back out to you guys, even though you just saw some of my own thoughts and answers. Why do you think that may be the case? So we've got some deceit issues going on, right? As brought up, that money may be a way that couples are betraying each other. I would love to study that. I'd love to study people who are cheating or feel like they're being deceived by their spouses, right? Maybe pathological gambling is kind of something that relates to that, but there's other areas. So why else? Why else? If it is the case, if there is evidence to suggest that money may be qualitatively different, why might that be the case? Yeah, please.
Maybe stress, because money and not having money is stressful, and spending money is stressful, and making money is stressful. So that it just adds stress to the relationship.
Okay. Yeah, so it could be an issue of financial stress, right? Absolutely. I like that. Yeah.
It could just be that it's exacerbating other issues, such as time together or other things like that.
Okay, so we got work family issues maybe which involve money, and which might exacerbate other things. Or if you don't have money, that might just exacerbate other issues that are going on in the marriage. Yeah, sure.
I think people have different spending styles as well. So if you have a really frugal member of the couple, and then you have one that just spends and spends and spends, like that, I've seen that provide, I know 10, 20 couples that's the case, where they just bang heads and she spent all this money and or they have different priorities about how money should be spent.
Yeah, and maybe we don't sort that out before we get married, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like even me at a graduate level, I don't know very much about money and how to deal with it, how to budget, and how to buy a house, or this and that, and that. It's like maybe you don't know how to, so then when you get in that conflict, you don't know how to solve it.
Okay, so maybe it's just a matter that we haven't all taken SFL 260 from Dr. Hill, right? Maybe if we all had 260 from Dr. Hill with more knowledge, maybe we wouldn't get into fights as more often. Okay, I like that. Yeah, sure. Other thoughts? Yeah, sure.
This thought is, I wonder if it's because it affects so many values simultaneously. Some of the other issues may be more dependent, but money will affect the way your children are raised, like the stability you have, how you spend time. And so, I don't know, I think it could affect all of your values.
Okay, yeah, so money has a lot of interesting implications for other areas of your life, right? Maybe leisure, maybe your children's opportunities, and so on and so forth. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so let me take you to my poorly animated slide. I'll put up here are all my three reasons. I think the most obvious one was one of the ones that was mentioned first. People have financial problems, and financial problems aren't fun, right? They are a source of stress. I don't care what stress model you use, although I think all stress models are really just Hill's ABCX model with the serial number scratched off. Right. Finances can be a huge stressor, and finances as a stressor are a kind of a unique breed of problems, right? Not having enough, or not having enough income, for example, or having too much debt, or just any type of financial difficulty that can lead to poor affective states, right? I think two less obvious, which have also been brought up in different ways, is we all have different individual emotional meanings of money, right? Each of us have ideas about what money means to us, and often those emotional meanings aren't really in our mind consciously, right? And then, of course, money is also related to underlying couple dynamics, and we'll discuss all three of these in more depth. But I want to show you, we'll start with the first one, want to show you, this is Rand Conger's family stress model of economic pressure and marital distress, and they shorten it to the family stress model for short. Conger's family stress model of economic pressure and marital distress. Okay, Rand Conger was at a university in Iowa during the 80s, late 70s and early 80s. Russia was having a problem meeting their grain needs. And so Russia was just importing huge quantities of American grain. Well, when you've got a product that's in demand, what happens to that product? The price goes up. Well, is the price of corn and wheat going up a good thing for farmers or a bad thing for farmers? Good thing, right? So the farmers in Iowa and other areas in the Midwest in the late 70s were just making cash. And they thought, look at this problem, we can expand, and as the prices go up, it doesn't matter because we're just getting more and more money. And so farms expanded, they bought more equipment, farmers bought more equipment, they went deep into debt, and then the market crashed. And then the grain market crashed. And so what that meant for these families near where Rand Conger was huge financial problems. And so Rand Conger and his colleagues started studying these farm families with a lot of really great innovative methods. Came up with this model of the ways that money impacts family stress. First, we start with the financial issues, right? These are the negative financial events. These are the financial problems. They're objective. They really exist, right? Unstable work, poverty, any type of financial setback, debt, whatever you want to throw into here, right? These are the negative financial events, the objective stuff that gets there. That leads to, if I've animated it correctly, what we call economic strain, or Rand Conger called it economic pressure, okay? And these are the feelings that there is too much month left and not enough money left, right? This is the feeling in the pit of your stomach that I don't have enough money to make ends meet. Okay, that's what economic pressure is. It's an affective state that is focused on money. Okay, economic strain or economic pressure. I actually like the word economic pressure better. I wish I'd put economic pressure up there. So, if you're taking notes, scratch out strain and put pressure. That leads to negative affect, right? Economic pressure is going to lead to negative affect, depression, anxiety, and hostility. Right. These are the affective states that Rand Conger observed in these farm families. That once they hit that economic pressure, that often led to the negative affect. Well, negative affect in the context of relationship, good thing or bad thing? Bad thing, right? And that's what led to the marital distress. However Rand Conger defined it, and he defined it multiple ways. It was the negative affect that would eventually lead to the marital distress. So it is the case that people will seek marital therapy, right, because they're having distress, but the underlying issue is they're having financial problems, right? Yes, they're fighting about everything, but the reason they're fighting about everything is because they're experiencing some intense pressure due to some kind of negative, economic or financial event, right? Now, I've used this model in my research. This model has been verified nationally, internationally. It seems to work well, seems to hold up pretty well in the research. Lots of papers published. I did a paper on it looking at consumer debt to see if consumer debt would push this model forward, and it did seem to work out. Consumer debt was related to, right? Consumer debt is the credit card debt, right, or the installment loans from the furniture stores, right? Consumer debt was positively associated with economic strain, and it kind of went through the whole model. What was interesting, though, was even after I had included all the rest of the model, there was still a direct link between between consumer debt and marital distress, which in this case I was using couple conflict, and I had thrown financial conflict out. So my measure of conflict didn't include anything related to finances. And so consumer debt was still, it did go through the process, but there was still a link between consumer debt and marital distress that was unaccounted for by the rest of the model. So that was interesting. I haven't followed that finding up yet, but
Can I ask a little bit
please,
about that?
yeah.
So you're saying that consumer debt contribute to marital stress without the financial conflict. But isn't consumer debt financial conflict?
Yes, it is, and consumer debt is strongly associated with financial conflict, but I wanted to see if consumer debt would make things work even after we took out the financial conflict. Is there some kind of spillover? It was what I was asking, yeah.
They're not having financial conflict, but they have a lot of debt.
Well, they might have been having financial conflict, but I didn't want that to be in this measure. So I had all other types of conflict other than financial in my measure of conflict. And so what we see is that people with consumer debt had more conflict, even the conflict that's not of the financial variety. So it's kind of a it was kind of a spillover effect. Yeah. Yeah, which is kind of interesting to me, right? I don't know. I get geeky about my own findings. So it's like, ooh, this is cool. Okay. So it is the case, and I think this is kind of an extremely important grass is green idea that might get overlooked, right? I think sometimes we as, well, I'll speak for myself, we as academics, and I assume that sometimes in therapy it's more tempting to look for the deeper issues, the more introspective and deeper underlying type issues. And I don't know, maybe you guys are always looking right at the surface. But this is like a surface problem that happens that it's not anything about their families of origin or anything else. They just got problems, right? He lost his job. She lost her job, right? Maybe when they were young and got married, they assumed too much consumer debt buying all their furniture. You know, who knows, right? Sometimes the grass is just green, and you got to address that, right? All right. I used to dance when my undergrad's phones went off, but all right. Okay. Okay. So this is, I think that this notion of financial stress is important, and I wish Lee Johnson were here, but he's not, because I have some questions for Lee. I'll tell you what I'm going to ask Lee later. All right.
So I'm
Please.
about assessment, like when you
Yeah.
get a new couple
Yeah.
in there. I don't think that on my my assessment it ever asked about financial problems. Or anything on there.
Yeah.
So there should be, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, because sometimes, I mean, what if there's just spillover from this fact that she has lost her job or he has lost his job, or they're going through foreclosure through no fault of their own, right? They're just, I mean, we had that recession, 2007, 2009 recession, where a lot of people went through foreclosures because they bought a little bit too much house, right? And they couldn't afford it when the economy tanked. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, y'all can take this for what you want. Whether again, I started out this presentation by saying, you guys can take your own implications for practitioners. I have no section of implications for practitioners. You guys can take it for what you want. But yeah, maybe we should be asking couples about their financial situation. Is that one of the things that's adding to their stress, right? Because maybe given the taboo of financial issues in our culture, they're not going to tell you straight out unless you ask. I don't know. Again, I'm not a practitioner. I don't pretend to be one. All right, let's talk about. Let's do this. Let's do this in a minute. Let's make a list. I forgot that's not a pull-up. There we go. We're going to make a list of what money symbolizes in our culture. It doesn't have to be what money symbolizes to you. But what can money symbolize in our culture? Do I dare risk doing that for a minute? Yes, I'll dare. It might not come back on, but whatever. What might money symbolize in our culture? Okay, security.
Status.
Ooh, status. What else?
Power.
Power.
Opportunity.
Opportunity.
Righteousness.
Righteousness. we laugh, but that is, you know, that sometimes happens within our own Mormon subculture, and there are you know, subcultures where that's definitely part of righteousness. Yeah. What else I'm hearing? Sorry. Privilege. Privilege. Spelling was my worst subject in school, so if I misspelled privilege. Pride. Pride and work. Can I throw in with work success? What else? Time. Okay.
Somebody said worth.
Worth. Yeah, personal worth. Personal worth, I'm going to just throw esteem on here, right? We can put that there. What else? Freedom. Yeah, I like that. That probably goes up there with opportunity. Okay.
Happiness.
Happiness. Okay. What else? Comfort. Yeah, we'll throw up comfort by itself, but it probably is somewhat related to status and security, maybe. We're missing a big one.
Fame.
Okay, fame, sure. If you're rich, you're famous, but if you're famous, doesn't necessarily mean you're rich. I don't know, yeah, okay. Fame. Tell you a story of the one I think we're all missing. I had a good friend. His brother was getting married. They were twins. His brother was getting married. They went out ring shopping. His brother was going to buy his wife. This was 10, 15 years ago, so adjust your cost estimates accordingly. His brother was going to buy his fiancée an $8,000 wedding ring. Okay? Yeah. She was upset because he wasn't willing to fork over an additional $4,000 for the designer cut. Apparently there's designer cuts in diamonds. So she was mad that he wasn't willing to spring for a $12K engagement ring. Okay? And what did she say? What did she say when asked why? Well, okay, everyone has them, but
I'm not with them.
right, he doesn't love me enough to buy me the $12,000 ring. Fortunately, he realized this is going to be a problem in our entire marriage, so he broke off the engagement. Yeah, I'm not sure whether she got to keep the $8,000 ring. I'm not sure he ever bought it, but anyway, okay. Love, what else? Are we missing anything?
Education.
Okay, yeah, sure, education. I'll throw that up here, maybe. So it hasn't taken us very long to put a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of ideas or ideals or values that money might symbolize to someone personally, right? So money is hugely symbolic, right? Money has, in my opinion, and I'm not getting this from myself, these are other people's ideas too. Money has a symbolic power that rivals, I think, and exceeds almost anything else. Okay, I think there are other things that have as much symbolism as money, but not very many, especially in our particular culture, right, in the broader U.S. culture. Do you have a comment or question? No? Okay. Okay, so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we all have HDMI. We all have kind of individual meanings of what money means to us, and often these meanings aren't necessarily apparent until we start to think about them. So we're going to take a little quiz. Right, you guys didn't know there was going to be a quiz today, did you? So I'm going to throw up some statements about money, and I want you to either rate yourself A, B, or C. Okay, obviously there's no right answers, these are all opinions. I have automated my paycheck so the first 5% or more goes towards retirement. Now I realize you MFT students may or may not have paychecks. I don't know how things work here, BOU, but.
Why would
Why would we give money to the MFT students? Okay. If I get unexpected money, I generally put at least some of it toward charitable causes. How true is that of you? Well, you guys can interpret however you want charitable causes, right? Money should be enjoyed, not hoarded. I have set some money aside. Whoa, that's worded poorly. I have some money set aside in case of emergency. Ignore the first set. I have some money set aside in case of emergency. And then the last one, I use my money to buy the finer things in life. I use my money to buy the finer things in life. And I'm going to include tech in that, because sometimes graduate students laugh, haha, I don't have any money. I'm like, yeah, well, your tech exceeds my tech. Okay. So if you think about this, all of these statements have to do with some type of emotional meaning of money, right? So if this is the case, what would we say this statement says about the person who says it? What do they think money is best used for, or what's their emotional? Yeah.
Preparing for the future?
Yeah, so some type of future use or security or you know, some type of, yeah, something like that, sure. How about this one? Money should be enjoyed, not hoarded. What does that say about this person and what they think about money? They're broke. Yeah, we're trying to be non-judgmental here, right? No wrong answers. They value opportunity or fun or experiences or stuff, right? Yeah, sure. Okay. So we all have, yes, please.
I think it's interesting that my response to that is totally based on how I view money.
Yes.
Right? So I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, they're broke, right? If someone says this, they're broke, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, and that's based on your own emotional ideas about money, right? That's interesting. I'm glad you made that connection. Yeah, that's right. So we do have these emotional meanings of money, and they are at the individual level, and they are often at lower levels of what we think about. We don't usually drive home from work and think, oh, I wonder what my emotional meaning of money is, right? Or I wonder how I think money should best be spent, right? And we do have these different meanings, and they are often deep and visceral and strongly held opinions, and we often just know that that's the way money should be spent. And that's the best way to use money, right? Which is fine until we get married or coupled and we run up against someone who has different, deeply held emotional meanings of money, right? So, yeah, and it's fun to think about where these things come from, right? It's fun to think about where these might come from. Where might these emotional meanings of money come from? What do you think? Yeah.
The economic status of your family of origin.
Yeah, okay. Maybe your economic status of your family of origin, or your family of origin in general, right? But economic, your SES, the class that your family came from. Yep. Where else might these meanings of money come from? I mean, let's not just blame mom, right? Yeah. Yeah, personal experiences that we've had. Yep. Your personality, right? Yeah, sure. That very much so. Yeah, your own individual personality. Yeah.
Your values.
Mm-hmm. Your values. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I think two stories. One is kind of flippant, and the other is a little more, I think illustrative. My own personal experiences. So when about every fourth or fifth time that I'd go with my dad and he'd fill up the car, he'd say, we'd be driving home from work or whatever. My dad involved us in his work a lot. We'd be driving home from work, he'd fill up his car, and about every fourth or fifth time he'd say, now, if you want soda, you never buy soda from the convenience store Because you could buy a 6-pack of soda for as much as they charge for one soda in there. Never do that. And so all my life I grew up thinking that anybody who bought soda at convenience stores were just unaware of the fact that they could get 6 times as much at the grocery store, right? It wouldn't be cold. They'd have to go home and refrigerate it themselves. But you know, why would anyone buy? Right. Okay. So that's the flippant example of, right, these emotional meanings of money from my dad, from family of origin. When my wife and I got married, you know, we didn't have money for a while. But when we did start having more money, more discretionary income, she started wanting big chunks of money to send the kids to lessons. And I never understood that. And she would say things like, well, Jeff, it helps them have opportunities for later in life. And I could see how that was true, right? I could see, okay, if my son learns the piano, he may be able to play the piano on his mission, and maybe that will help him cognitively because, you know, studies show that kids who play the piano have better cognitive development. I don't know, whatever. So I could see that, but I never understood, well, why are we devoting such a big portion of our budget to these lessons? I couldn't understand it. Until finally she told me a story about growing up. She said, when I was a little girl, I was in dance class, and then one day, my dad took me on his lap and told me that I couldn't go to dance class anymore because they didn't have the money to keep paying for dance class, right? And so then I really understood why my wife wanted money to send the kids to lessons, right? Wanted us to devote that portion of our budget toward lessons because she wanted the kids to have something that she didn't get to have when she was a kid, or that she had actually started having and then got taken away. Okay, so I finally understood that, and that made me a lot more willing to agree with that part of our budget, right? Okay, so we do attach these emotional meanings, and when these emotional meanings conflict, that's, I think, where money starts to be qualitatively problematic or qualitatively different for couples than other issues, is because they have these deeply symbolic meanings of money, and those symbolic meanings are conflicting. Yeah, it's just, you know, what's going to happen when that free spirit, that person who doesn't really think about money because money is just, you know, ways to have experiences and fun, marries the person who's deeply concerned about their future, right, their stability. And if they don't talk about that as they're getting ready to get married, you know, that can be a problem. All right, so emotional meanings of money. I think one of the most interesting and fun things to think about. Okay, the last explanation is kind of this notion that the fights about money really aren't about money. Okay, what they really are is that couples are using money as a proxy to fight about deeper relationship issues, right? We're not talking about what money means to them. We're talking about they've got relationship issues and they're using money as a way to fight about them, okay? Because money is deeply symbolic. Okay? So money's just a proxy. Money's just a proxy, and they're actually fighting about their relationship using money. So what are some relationship issues that couples might use money to fight about? Here we're talking about the deep ones, yeah.
Maybe just decision-making, power.
Yeah, power. I love it. Yeah, decision-making power, who's got the power, all of that, yeah. It might be about power. What else? What else might they be using money to fight about besides power?
I just had a couple recently. I was just thinking about this, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's totally a couple I'm working with.
Yeah.
Because they have all these fights about money, and then all of a sudden I got them to a place of like, well, actually, I'm nervous I'm not the most important thing, like, because these things come first, whether it be this family helping them with money, or spending it on this or this. It's like, I don't feel important. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, back to love and value, right? So so love, being loved, being valued, right? Yeah, good. So we've got power and we've got being loved and valued. What else? I think that's a great illustration.
Would you put control?
Yeah.
Power?
Control and autonomy. Yeah, for sure. It could be linked with power. It doesn't have to be, right? Control and autonomy. What else?
Underlying issues of not feeling good enough.
Esteem. Yep. How might that work out?
Well, if somebody feels like finances aren't enough, let's say the provider of the family, they're not good enough.
Okay.
And that's a basic underlying need that you need to feel good enough.
Okay. Yeah. What else? Let me give you a list. This list is adopted from one of the references on your sheet, the Shapiro book, which is a lot of fun. And you'll also see the Shapiro book is, not the Shapiro book, sorry, the Jenkins book. Shapiro is another great article, but the Jenkins book, co-authored by Scott Stanley and Howard Markman, and actually a guy named Bill Bailey, who I know personally, real good guy. So this is a list adapted from their book. So money problems are really about autonomy, about caring, about power and control, about respect, trust, commitment, integrity, feeling loved, esteemed, right? So what I want you to do, I want you to write down a little scenario, okay? Write down a scenario. If you're already seeing a couple who has this issues, write that down. But if you're not, make up how might a couple who comes into your office, they're fighting about money, but it's really about one of these things, write down how that might actually look. Or write down their context that kind of might give you an idea that it's actually about this. Is that specific enough? Enough information? I would say write a case study, but I don't want you to spend that much time, right? Write a brief case study about a couple fighting about money, but they're not really fighting about money. They're fighting about their underlying relationship dynamics. All right, does anyone want to share their little scenario? No one?
I will.
Okay, great.
So, young mother, husband's controlling with the money, so she hides her spending, and then he finds it out, and they fight about that, and she feels like he's even more controlling. She gets this giant student loan that is her money suddenly, and she secretly spends it all, and so they're fighting about that, like that's big news, like what did you spend it all on? Just stuff, and he doesn't get it. He wants to know everything she spent. So.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I like that. Okay, I've got a reader's theater. You get to diagnose a couple. Again, I'm not a clinician, so if this seems a little clumsy, that's why. Who wants to be our narrator? Need a brave soul to be our narrator. Who wants to be our narrator? Okay, great. Here's our narrator. Who wants to be Mary? Mary. Who wants to be Fred? Fred. All right, we got Fred. Okay. We're going to hear from the narrator first, then from Mary, then from Fred. Go ahead, narrator.
Fred, a patent lawyer, and Mary, an accountant, come into counseling because they have frequent conflicts over finances. Arguments have become more heated over time, and they have started fighting in front of their child, something they swore they would never do.
Okay, Mary, let's hear your side of the story.
Fred refuses to put his money with my money in a joint checking account. He also doesn't even really tell me what he does with his money. I do know that he pays for the mortgage and I make the car and all the insurance payments, but he won't tell me a thing about what he does with the rest of, quote, his money. It hurts me and he doesn't tell me. After all, I could help him with my accounting expertise so that he'd have even more money. I'd also like to know what that he's spending it wisely.
Okay, Fred, what do you have to say about that?
I just don't see what Mary's problem is. I pay the mortgage every month, never miss a payment. Maybe put a little bit extra on the principal every year. Mary has her own 401k at work, and I've got my own retirement plan. We've got cash on hand for any emergencies, but the rest is my money. I should be able to do what I want with it, and I'm free to not tell Mary what I'm doing.
Okay. What are some of the underlying issues for Mary? I mean, it is about money, but it's also not about money, right? What are some of Mary's, yeah. Okay, maybe commitment. Maybe she's questioning Fred's commitment. What else? Yeah.
Like control.
Control. Okay. Trust.
Definitely trust.
Yeah, trust. She's worried. I want to know that he's spending it wisely.
Maybe integrity too.
Yeah, what about his integrity, right?
What is he really doing?
What is he really spending it on? I hope he's not blowing it on an online casino, right?
A wife on the side.
Right, right. Or mistress, sure. Okay.
Respect, like she has a degree in finances.
Okay. Okay, so maybe she wants to respect him more. Okay, what are his issues?
Her job.
Or yeah, she feels that she wants him to respect her job, her expertise. Good. What are his issues? Yeah, he wants the autonomy.
Some trust.
Maybe he's not feeling trusted.
Or doesn't trust her. Maybe he doesn't want her to spend all his money. Like he's fearful of her ability to spend all of his money.
Okay.
Control and power.
Control and power, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Now, if I were to look at this, if I were to read just hers, it would make me think this might be a second marriage for Mary, because I've known a lot of divorcees whose husbands, and it's funny, all the ones I've known, it's been the wife was the one who got burned. And the husband was spending on the side, although that doesn't always happen. Can happen the other way around, but maybe she got burned in a previous marriage, right? And now she really wants to know. Okay, so to see how this might work, back to the research. Okay, we're going to go back to the research. In two of my studies, I specifically looked at this, and it wasn't. One of the things in a study, this is kind of a secondary aim. This wasn't the main point of the study. But I wanted to see if feelings of unfairness were related to financial conflict. And it was absolutely, it was absolutely the case that the more unfairness that either spouse felt in the relationship, the more they fought about the money, which is really kind of interesting to me. Another thing that I looked at was, in another study, I specifically wanted to see what predicted financial conflict. One of the biggest, this goes back to something we talked about before, one of the biggest predictors of financial conflict in that study was if they were experiencing economic pressure. Right? So the more economic pressure they felt, the more they were fighting about the money. So, okay, the grass is green. But it was also the case, and again, I'm going to read this just so I don't get it wrong. For both the husbands and the wives, the more commitment there was, and the more feelings of respect, the less they fought about money. Okay, so I do have commitment listed there. So when husbands and wives felt more commitment, they reported less financial conflict. And when the more respect in the relationship they felt, the less conflict they reported. Now for the husbands, there was more. Okay, so when husbands reported good communication and feelings of fairness, they reported less financial conflict. So again, sometimes these things underlie those problems. All right.
I have
Please.
a wondering.
Yes,
here.
please.
If financial disparity between the two, the husband and
Yeah.
wife, if the wife makes way more than the husband,
Yeah.
the husband makes more
Yeah.
than the wife. Like I look at this particular case with Mary and
Fred.
or Fred,
Yeah.
whatever my husband's
Yeah.
name is over there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
you have seen any of that in your research, being
So I have looked every once in a while at the disparity in terms of the income, what percentage of the income she earns versus he earns, and what seems to matter more than how much he earns versus she earns is the feelings of fairness in the financial situation itself. So if let's take a stereotypical breadwinner, stay-at-home mom type situation, right? He's got all the money, or he's earning all the money. Okay, if they report financial fairness, they're going to be happy. Let's say you take a couple that's got some kind of, she earns 60%, he earns 40%. If they report financial unfairness, they're going to be less happy than that breadwinner couple. So really fairness and equity matters more than what we would say equality, right? Equity meaning fairness, equality meaning sameness. Now, that being said, there are some really interesting papers that I haven't looked at myself. I've read the papers. I haven't looked at this topic myself. In couples where when she out-earns him substantially, and what we see in a lot of those couples is they still replicate gendered stereotypical attitudes about what's going on. And the people who have done these studies suggest that that's because both the couples are trying to maintain, we're talking about heterosexual couples here, right? Both individuals in the couples want to maintain their gendered identity, right? She still wants to feel like a good mom, and he still wants to feel like a good provider, even though, she might be earning 80-90% of the money, and he's only earning 10%. They still want those, kind of socially normative gendered identity roles. So, yeah.
So that brought up another wondering about
Sure.
fairness
Mm-hmm,
and what people are looking at fairness. Is that equality in that they get the exact same amount, or do they get what they need, or do they get what they want?
Yeah.
Or does it look like I make more money, so it should be fair that I get more? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so it's tricky, right? This notion of okay, so what defines equality? That gets to be tricky, right? Especially when you've got dual earners. Let's say there is a 60-40 split. She earns 60%, he earns 40%. Well, so how do they decide to divide the household expenses? Does she pay for 60% and he pay for 40% because that's the relative amounts they earn? Well, that disadvantages her, right? Or do they split it 50-50 and he pays for 50% and she pays for 50% because that's equal? Well, that disadvantages him, right? And so that gets really tricky. I haven't looked into that, and I'm not sure very many people have. The data needs for that get to be pretty extreme. And it's funny, it's easier to get, so if you want to do a research study, you have to go through your institutional review board, right? Your IRB at your university or think tank or wherever you're at. It's easier to get questions about drug abuse and sex through the IRB than it is to get money. I had an experience where I was trying to get a question through the IRB, and I wanted to know the exact dollar amount in terms of assets and consumer debt that people had. My IRB freaked out. You can't ask that. Well, so-and-so asked about drug abuse. Well, that's drug abuse, right? You can't ask people their dollar amount of their assets. That's great, So part of the reason that we don't have some of this stuff is because it's harder to get research on some financial issues. Anyway, I'm sorry. Questions? Please, more questions.
My other question is around this spousal money thing, right? So Fred and Mary or whatever, they have split checking accounts. Do you find that couples do that, or do most couples put it all together and then figure it out together, or does someone, like, how often, I've seen all, really. Is that what it is?
So the vast majority of couples combine their income streams, especially among married couples. Cohabiting couples is much less, right? But especially among married couples, it's probably about 80%, I'd say. That being said, we're still interested in this question of joint versus separate. Is one group happier or not? We don't have enough studies to come to a conclusion. The general thought is that people who have their accounts held jointly tend to be happier in their marriage, except with the exception of people who've been divorced before. They're happier if they keep them separate for, I think, probably understandable reasons. But the problem with that is we don't have good enough research to know if the direction goes from jointly held checking account to happiness, or it's the other way around. Happy couples are more likely to hold their checking account jointly because they have less risk, right? So we don't know the answer to that question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, please.
Just along the lines of fairness. So, in addition to fairness regarding distribution of
Yeah.
income,
Yeah.
what about fairness? I'm just trying to understand what fairness means.
Yeah.
Is it also decision-making abilities? Does that have been part of this?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I don't know, and frankly, I think that what is considered fair is couple-specific, right? That might be a good question for you guys to ask your clients as they come in and someone says, that's not fair. You say, okay, you just said the F word. What does that mean to you? Because what it means to him might be different than what it means to her, right? So, again, I'm not a practitioner. I have never seen a single couple in my entire life. But my guess is that the definition of fair is couple-specific. So when I ask it on my surveys, national representative data, yada, yada, I'm getting kind of a interpreted meaning that is averaged out across these 1,300 couples that I have. So I'm sorry, I can't give you a definition of what is fair.
But that is a great idea to ask that.
Yeah.
I'll open a huge
Yeah.
box somewhere.
Yeah. What do you think's fair? And maybe you've got this, again, let's go back to the 60-40 couple where she earns 60 and he earns 40 and she says, hey, I want 50%, I want to do it 50-50, and he says, no, I want it based on what percentage we're earning, right? Because that's how each one is advantaged. And then you can talk about notions of fairness and how either one is a type of fairness, right? The 50-50 is a type of fairness. It's a type of equality. The 40-60 is also a type of fairness, also a type of equality. So how they resolve that, I have no idea, right? But at least they start to think about that. Okay. So this one's really interesting. All right. So the summary, let me give you what the research suggests. So the second question is why? Why might money be qualitatively different than other issues in marriage? There is a lot of research that financial issues stress people out, right? And that, again, the grass is green. Jeff, why are we even having you here to tell us this? We know this already, right? We experience this individually, Jeff. We know that financial issues are stressors. There have been a lot of studies of financial stressors being associated with relationship problems. Okay, lots of support on that one. Individual meaning of money. Fun, fascinating, but hardly anybody has studied it. We have almost nothing on this notion that, well, I'm looking for security in the way I use my money. You are looking for status as you use your money, and so our notions of money conflict, and so that's causing us problems. There hasn't been not much support at all on that. Then this other notion that financial conflict is often really reflective of underlying relationship dynamics. There is some growing support for that notion that sometimes financial conflict, marital conflict over finances is really reflective of deeper relationship issues. And that Shapiro study on your list really goes into this. And I highly recommend the Shapiro study just because she kind of lays out actually how financial issues might be used as a tool in therapy. So, again, boy, how many times I've said this? I'm not a therapist, but I think it might be useful for you guys. All right. Okay. So, summary to question 2. Okay, where does that leave us? Oh, and I need to say this. These things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, right? We could have a financial stressor. Maybe the couple's getting foreclosed on, and so it's really stressing them out. But maybe there's also some underlying issues in their relationship that this stressor is bringing out, right? So again, the answer to the question why, these answers are not necessarily mutually exclusive. All right, they don't fit in neat boxes, right? Does anything ever fit in neat boxes in therapy? Right? No. Okay. Okay, so now the question is what now? And again, in which Jeff explores possibilities but admits his total ignorance. What down? I think one of the first things, if people are presenting with financial conflict, find out the underlying reasons, right? Because I think if they say, oh yeah, it's because she just lost her job and we're really struggling to make ends meet and really fighting about it, well, I think that the answer to that or the help for that is totally different than if it's the case that there's a control issue or a power issue, right? So, okay, that's, okay, Jeff can even go there, right? Jeff can figure that out, figure out what the underlying reason is. I think sometimes joint counseling might be helpful, and here's where I was going to ask Dr. Lee Johnson to talk. He's not here. But Dr. Johnson, when he was at Georgia, they had a really innovative program there. They had a center where people came to get services. And so you had a marital therapist whose office was right next to a financial counselor whose office was right next to an interior design specialist whose office was right next to and I'm probably misrepresenting this, you guys need to talk to Dr. Jordan about this, whose office was next to an individual therapist's office, right? So they had a whole bunch of service providers in one place, and then they were able to, when they found these issues of comorbidity, they were able to address them simultaneously. So if you had a couple who, they were fighting about money all the time, but they didn't know the first thing about setting a budget. They've only heard the word budget, but they don't know what it means, right? Well, that could be part of their problem, right? If they could get on a budget, a budget that they both agreed on, right? A jointly held budget, maybe that would solve some of their problems. And so, sometimes if they're, or if it's the case that someone is, that they're in counseling in marital therapy because of these financial problems, like a job loss or other issues like that, then it might be the case that some type of multimodal, do I dare say that? Is that a word you guys use? Okay, I'm seeing yes, right. Where people meet with multiple service providers might help, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be like jointly happening at the same time, but maybe it could, right? That'd be brave, that'd be bold, I don't know if that legally could happen, I don't know. I'm not sure. But so that might be a thing. And you might say, well, why did they have interior design? I'll give you an example. I'm not sure if it's from their center or a center like it, the one in Georgia or somebody else's, but they had someone come in and the issue was he had just been diagnosed with some sort of health problem and they were fighting about it, so they got them involved in support for this health issue, they got them involved in family therapy, and then the interior designer went and found that their home was completely insufficiently set up to handle this person's health problem, which involved mobility issues. And so the interior designer had them say, okay, you need to remodel this area, you need to redo this with your doorways, you need to change this. And so actually changing their household actually helped reduce the stress in the home, right? So, okay. All right.
Can I comment about that?
Please.
So I'm actually an MSW, I'm an LCSW, and when you do the MSW program, there's a ton of that, where you're not only their therapist, but you're getting them the resources that they need to get healthy, and that includes all of that stuff you're saying. So there's all these different factors coming in, and you help them get those. So that is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yep. Again, I don't do this kind of stuff, but this is just what I hear is happening. Utah State, actually, where I came from, is embarking on this. They're building a new center where they're going to house all the MFT people, all the financial counseling people, all of the health people, all of the health and kinesiology people, right? The people who help individuals with mobility issues. They're going to put the audiologists there. The Utah State has a world-renowned what is it called? Audiology, speech and communicative disorders program. So all of them are going to be housed in one area, and so anyway, it's a pretty cool idea. Okay, so here I'm going to step aside and say I have no idea. But from what you've learned today, might financial issues be leveraged as part of the therapy? And if so, how? All right, how might therapists involved in any type of couples or family therapy leverage financial stuff as part of the therapy itself?
I'm just not getting the question, so like,
Yeah.
what do you mean by?
So,
Leverage in what sense?
yeah. Well, so this idea is, okay, we know they've got a financial problem. We know that they're fighting about finances for some reason. How can we take and use that to help them improve their relationship, right? How can we, this notion of using the problem to help them understand more about themselves or the relationship, right? Maybe the word leveraged is wrong. Yeah.
The only example I can think of right now is like I've had couples that are kind of like trying to decide if they want to get divorced or not. And same goes with kid issues. But it's kind of like, well, if you get divorced, you're still going to have to figure out this issue, right? You're going to have to communicate about how you want to divide everything up. And so sometimes I'll just say, so whether you get divorced or not, can we work on communicating about finances or about kids? And then they're doing marriage therapy, but around the issue that whether they divorce or not, they're going to have to be able to work on it.
Okay. Yeah.
Admittedly, I'm biased
Yeah.
by the perspective that I use in therapy, which is an emotionally focused therapy perspective. Everything's about attachment.
Right.
So any issue that comes in, I'm going to, it doesn't matter what this is any issue, I'm going to say, okay, what's the meaning of that for you?
Right.
I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we can't solve any problems until we understand what's the meaning. So I'll get down to the meaning, and then when they can start communicating about the meaning to each other in a responsive way, then we can start addressing issues, and then they're in a frame of mind where they can, and that's where I would refer out. But like, I can't even refer them to financial specialists. They can't talk about it in a respectful, responsive way.
Right, yeah, a couple can't set up a budget together if if they don't agree on some of the fundamentals, right? Where are they looking to go with their, with their financial union, right? Because that's what, as much as people talk, marriage is a financial union, right? It's a union of many types, sexual and all that type of stuff, but it's also a financial union. So yeah, they've got to address some of the underlying fundamentals before they can agree on that, Yeah, I don't have the answer to this, and maybe I asked it in a wrong way. See, maybe this is where it would have been helpful to have some therapy training so I could ask this question correctly. But anyway.
We generally don't use things as leverage against our clients, right?
Well, I don't know. See, even the word leverage might be loaded in a way that it is for you guys that it's not for me, right? I don't want you guys to use anything against anybody, right? But if the word leverage implies hitting your clients over the head with a crowbar, that might be a problem. Yeah, go ahead.
One thought I have is, we've talked about how financial strain can cause conflict in marriage, and I'm wondering if you could use financial issue to, sometimes their financial issues just happen to them, but sometimes maybe it's something deeper that can cause them to overspend or not good budget. And I think some of those insecurities can lead to financial strain. So you could use a financial issue to get down to a deeper issue.
Okay, that's possible. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that, thinking about, maybe it's just because I'm a therapist and I'm always trying to figure out how to make therapy work, right? So, but I feel like this gives me a good idea of why you're not able to get the deeper meaning, or maybe there isn't one, maybe all they need is financial help, maybe like that's my avenue to change, that's my avenue to help them, or maybe that's what helps them relieve the stress to actually talk about the deeper stuff, or I have never thought about, like, oh, maybe they don't even know how to make a budget, and if they know how to make one, that would be a huge level of stress, like maybe they still have problems they want to work on.
but that could bring off a layer, or that could open up
Yeah.
something more.
Yeah.
That's what they want.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I don't have any answers. I don't even know, again, I don't know if this question is the right question, but anyway. All right, well, I appreciate y'all and your participation. So that's all I've got. I'd be willing to answer questions if you have additional questions about the research or what we found or anything like that. I'd be happy to answer questions.